Imagine falling in love with a charming man on Facebook, only to discover he's a convicted felon serving time in prison. You marry him behind bars, build a family, and fight for his freedom, only to have him repay your devotion with betrayal and murder. This is the harrowing tale of Tanisha Carter, a deputy sheriff who believed in second chances, and Reggie Lewis, the man who turned her life into a nightmare. It's a chilling reminder of how misplaced trust and unchecked love can lead to catastrophic consequences. Before we dive into this shocking story, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications to keep uncovering the darkest secrets that hide in plain sight. Tanisha Carter, a 29-year-old deputy sheriff in Atlanta, was everything you'd expect from someone who spent her days upholding the law, focused, tough, and incredibly dedicated. Despite her demanding career, Tanisha craved a connection that went beyond her professional life, one that brought her the companionship and love she felt was missing. It was through Facebook that Tanisha's world would change forever. Reggie Lewis, 34, had been serving time for armed robbery. When the two first connected, Tanisha was initially hesitant, not wanting to entertain the idea of a relationship with a man behind bars. But something about Reggie's charm and wit caught her attention. They began talking, first about simple things, and then the conversations grew deeper, more intimate. Reggie was articulate, thoughtful, and seemed to understand Tanisha in ways no one else had. He made her laugh, and for a while, it felt like their connection was one of those rare moments where everything just clicks. As their online relationship flourished, Tanisha's curiosity grew. One night, after weeks of chatting, she finally asked him directly, "What's your story? I need to know who I'm really talking to." Reggie hesitated before revealing his secret. He wasn't the man she thought he was a convicted felon, currently serving time in a Georgia prison. He had been convicted of armed robbery years ago, and while his actions were regrettable, he insisted he had changed. Tanisha was taken aback but refused to let his past define him. She decided to forgive him for not telling her the truth at first, believing everyone deserved a second chance. Her decision to accept Reggie's past wasn't without its complications. Family and friends warned her about getting involved with an incarcerated man, but Tanisha felt something deep inside her that told her Reggie was different. She visited him at the prison, their first face-to-face meeting filled with nervous energy, but when they finally spoke, the connection was undeniable. A few months later, after much deliberation, Tanisha made a bold decision: she married Reggie in prison. It wasn't a fairy tale romance, but it was theirs, and Tanisha believed in their future. She sent him letters, supported him emotionally, and soon, they had a family. Tanisha fought for Reggie's case to be reviewed, pushing to get him out early so they could have the life she had dreamed of together. What began as an unexpected, unconventional love story had blossomed into the foundation of a family that Tanisha was determined to protect, no matter the cost. Little did she know, the very man she trusted would soon turn her world upside down in the most unimaginable way. Tanisha Carter was not one to back down from a challenge, and her love for Reggie Lewis proved just that. Despite the obstacles of being married to a convicted felon serving time in a Georgia prison, Tanisha believed wholeheartedly in their love and the possibility of building a future together. It wasn't conventional, but Tanisha didn't care. She was determined to stand by Reggie's side, no matter what society or her peers thought. Conjugal visits became the cornerstone of their unconventional relationship. Tanisha worked long shifts at the sheriff's department, but every free moment she could spare was spent preparing for her visits to the prison. She would carefully choose her outfits, making sure she looked perfect, wanting Reggie to see the effort she put into being the woman he fell in love with. These visits were filled with stolen moments of intimacy, laughter, and shared dreams of the life they would one day have together. It was during one of these visits that their lives took a turn neither of them had anticipated. Tanisha discovered she was pregnant, with twins. The news came as a shock, but it filled her with a renewed sense of purpose. While some questioned her decision to bring children into such an uncertain situation, Tanisha saw it as a blessing. Reggie, too, was overjoyed, promising that he would be the father their children deserved. "When I get out, we're going to give them the life we never had," he said, holding her hand tightly. Pregnancy didn't slow Tanisha down. She juggled her demanding job as a deputy sheriff while visiting Reggie and preparing for their daughter's arrival. She decorated a nursery, painted in soft pinks and whites, envisioning the day Reggie would be there to hold their daughters for the first time. She often sent him photos of the nursery and ultrasound images, keeping him involved every step of the way. Tanisha named the twins Amara and Aaliyah, and their birth was a bittersweet moment. While Reggie couldn't be there in person, he was with Tanisha in spirit, calling her every chance he got to check on her and the babies. Tanisha's heart ached to have him by her side, but she held on to the belief that their family's future would be brighter. Driven by the desire to reunite her family, Tanisha became relentless in her efforts to get Reggie out of prison. She hired lawyers, filed appeals, and even spoke at local forums about criminal justice reform, using Reggie's story as an example of why everyone deserved a second chance. Her colleagues at the sheriff's department were divided. Some admired her dedication, while others thought she was blinded by love. After years of persistence, Tanisha's efforts finally paid off. 5 years after their prison wedding, Reggie's case was reviewed, and his sentence was reduced. When the day of his release finally came, Tanisha stood outside the prison gates with their twin daughters in her arms, tears streaming down her face as she watched Reggie walk out a free man. Reggie embraced his daughters for the first time, promising them and Tanisha that he would make up for all the lost time. To Tanisha, this moment was proof that love and determination could overcome any obstacle. She believed their struggles were behind them and that they were finally on the path to the life they had always dreamed of. But beneath Reggie's loving facade, a darker truth lingered, one that would shatter Tanisha's world in ways she could never have imagined. Reggie Lewis's release from prison was the moment Tanisha Carter had dreamed of for years. Watching him hold their daughters, Amara and Aaliyah, for the first time melted her heart. He was attentive, doting, and eager to make up for the lost years. To Tanisha, Reggie seemed like the embodiment of redemption, a man determined to prove that his mistakes didn't define him. In the weeks following his release, Reggie dove headfirst into family life. He accompanied Tanisha to parent-teacher meetings at the daycare, cooked breakfast for the twins every morning, and even joined her at church on Sundays. He showered Tanisha with affection, leaving handwritten notes on her pillow and surprising her with home-cooked dinners. For a while, life felt perfect. But as the novelty of his freedom wore off, subtle changes in Reggie's behavior began to emerge. At first, it was little things, missed dinners, an uncharacteristic irritability when the girls cried, or the way he seemed distracted during family outings. Tanisha brushed it off, attributing it to the adjustment period after prison life. After all, reintegrating into society wasn't easy, and she wanted to give him grace. Over time, the small cracks in Reggie's facade widened. He started staying out late, claiming he was meeting up with old friends or attending job interviews. Tanisha noticed that he often avoided answering his phone during these outings, and when he came home, he reeked of alcohol and cigarette smoke. "It's nothing, baby," he'd say with a dismissive wave. "I'm just blowing off some steam. Being locked up messes with your head, you know." Tanisha tried to be understanding, but her concerns grew. Reggie became increasingly secretive, keeping his phone locked and guarding it like a lifeline. He was no longer as involved with the twins, often retreating to their bedroom or stepping outside for long phone calls. Tanisha couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. Her suspicions reached a tipping point one evening when Reggie received a package in the mail. It was addressed to him, but when Tanisha innocently asked what it was, he snatched it away, mumbling something about personal business. Later that night, while Reggie was in the shower, Tanisha found the torn packaging in the trash. It was from a jewelry store, and the receipt listed a gold bracelet engraved with the name Tiana. Tanisha's heart sank. She didn't know anyone named Tiana, and her instincts told her this was more than just a misunderstanding. Confronting Reggie was nerve-wracking, but she couldn't keep quiet any longer. When she asked him about the bracelet, his reaction was defensive and evasive. "It's nothing," he snapped, refusing to make eye contact. "You're always looking for problems where there aren't any." As the weeks went on, Tanisha began noticing other red flags. There were unexplained charges on their joint bank account and vague excuses for why he needed to borrow her car so frequently. One night, while scrolling through social media, she stumbled across a photo of a woman tagged in a post from a bar downtown. The woman's name was Tiana, and sitting next to her in the photo, with his arm casually draped around her, was Reggie. Tanisha's world started to unravel. She couldn't ignore the evidence any longer. Reggie was hiding a part of his life from her, and it was clear that this other woman was involved. She confronted him again, this time armed with the photo. Reggie's response was chilling. Rather than apologizing or denying it, he turned the blame on Tanisha, accusing her of being controlling and untrusting. "Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with trying to keep tabs on me, we wouldn't have these problems," he spat. Tanisha was devastated. The man she had sacrificed so much for, the man she had fought to free, was slipping away from her. But what she didn't know was that Reggie's betrayal went deeper than she could have ever imagined. Hidden beneath his charming exterior was a secret so dark that it would soon shatter their family beyond repair. Tanisha's world came crashing down when she stumbled upon undeniable proof of Reggie's double life. While sorting through a pile of paperwork in their home office, she found a crumpled envelope tucked into one of Reggie's old duffel bags. Inside was a photo of Reggie with a woman and two teenage children, a girl and a boy who were unmistakably his. Their resemblance to him was uncanny, from the shape of their noses to the dimples in their cheeks. The back of the photo was dated just 3 months before his release, with the words, "Family Forever," scrawled in Reggie's handwriting. At first, Tanisha couldn't believe it. Maybe it was an old photo from a distant past, she thought. But her instincts told her otherwise. A gnawing suspicion led her to dig deeper. She began investigating Reggie's social media profiles, his phone records, and anything else she could get her hands on. What she found confirmed her worst fears. Reggie had a whole other family he had kept hidden, and they had been a part of his life all along. The woman in the photo was Tiana Jacobs, a woman Reggie had been involved with long before he went to prison, and apparently, even while he was behind bars. Their teenage children, Maya and Marcus, were now 16 and 14 years old. Tanisha felt sick to her stomach. All those nights Reggie had claimed to be adjusting to life outside, he had likely been reconnecting with them. Tanisha decided she couldn't stay silent any longer. That evening, after putting Amara and Aaliyah to bed, she confronted Reggie in their living room. Her voice trembled as she held up the photo. "Who are they, Reggie?" she demanded. "Who is Tiana? Who are Maya and Marcus? And don't you dare lie to me." Reggie froze, his usual charm replaced with a cold, calculating stare. "Tanisha, it's not what you think," he said, but the words rang hollow. "Not what I think?" Tanisha's voice cracked with fury. "You have a whole other family, Reggie. A wife, kids, what am I? Some backup plan? Some fool you can string along?" The argument escalated quickly. Reggie tried to deflect, accusing Tanisha of invading his privacy and making baseless accusations. But Tanisha wasn't backing down. She demanded answers, and when Reggie finally admitted to the truth, the betrayal was too much to bear. "I was there for you," Tanisha shouted, tears streaming down her face. "I married you in prison. I gave you 2 beautiful daughters. I fought for your freedom. And this is how you repay me?" Reggie's tone shifted from defensive to menacing. "I never asked you to fight for me," he snapped. "You think you're some kind of savior, but you don't know the half of what I've been through." Tanisha, still reeling, issued an ultimatum. It's either them or us, Reggie. You can't have both. If you even think about going back to Tiana, I'll make sure the parole board knows everything. You'll go right back to prison where you belong. Reggie's expression darkened, but he managed to mask his anger with a forced smile. Of course, baby. You're right. I'll cut ties with them. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. But deep down, Reggie had no intention of choosing Tanisha over Tiana and his other children. As Tanisha went to bed that night, emotionally drained and clutching her daughters close, Reggie sat alone in the living room, his mind racing. The ultimatum had backed him into a corner, and in his twisted logic, there was only one way out. Pretending to comply was easy, but as he stared at the photo of Tiana and his teenage children, a sinister plan began to take shape. Reggie was done living a double life. He wanted to return to the family he had built before prison, and in his mind, there was only one way to sever ties with Tanisha permanently. What Tanisha didn't know was that her confrontation had set a deadly chain of events into motion, one that would culminate in a tragedy so shocking that no one could have predicted it. Reggie's plan to eliminate Tanisha and their daughters began to take shape in the days following her ultimatum. His once loving demeanor faded, replaced by a cold detachment that Tanisha brushed off as tension from their argument. She had no idea that her husband, the man she had fought so hard to free, was plotting her demise. On a quiet Friday night, with the twins asleep in their bedroom and Tanisha preparing dinner in the kitchen, Reggie made his move. He approached Tanisha, feigning remorse. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, his voice soft and uncharacteristically tender. "You're right, Tanisha. I need to let go of the past and focus on us, on our family." Tanisha looked up from the pot she was stirring, hope flickering in her eyes. She smiled, relieved to hear the man she loved finally taking responsibility. "I'm glad you see that, Reggie," she said. "We can move past this. We've been through so much already." But Reggie's words were hollow. Behind his facade of reconciliation, he had already decided this would be their last meal together. After dinner, Reggie suggested they put the twins to bed together, a gesture that melted Tanisha's heart. As they tucked Amara and Aaliyah in, he kissed each girl on the forehead, whispering, "Daddy loves you." Once the girls were asleep, Reggie poured Tanisha a glass of wine and coaxed her into the living room. They sat on the couch, the atmosphere tense but deceptively calm. Reggie handed her the glass and watched as she sipped, his eyes calculating. It didn't take long for Tanisha to feel the effects of the drug Reggie had slipped into her drink. Her vision blurred, and her limbs grew heavy. "Reggie," she murmured, confusion and fear in her voice, "what's happening?" Reggie stood, his expression devoid of remorse. "I'm sorry, Tanisha," he said coldly. "But this is the only way." Tanisha tried to get up, but her body wouldn't respond. Panic set in as she realized the man she had loved and trusted was about to hurt her. Reggie didn't waste any time. He retrieved a knife from the kitchen, his movements methodical and detached. With Tanisha incapacitated, he carried out his horrific plan, ensuring there was no chance she could fight back. The attack was swift and brutal, leaving Tanisha lifeless on the living room floor. Next, Reggie turned his attention to the twins. He entered their bedroom, the sight of his sleeping daughters momentarily softening his resolve. But in his twisted mind, leaving them alive wasn't an option. "I'm sorry," he whispered, tears streaming down his face as he committed the unthinkable. After murdering Tanisha and their daughters, Reggie carried their lifeless bodies to the basement of their home. In a twisted attempt to cover his tracks, he wrapped the twins in blankets and left them hidden in the cold, dark space, thinking no one would discover the horrifying truth. The basement, once a place of storage and safety, became a chilling grave for the family he had so callously destroyed. With his family gone, Reggie cleaned himself up, changed his clothes, and gathered his things. He left the house under the cover of darkness, leaving no trace of his presence behind. By the time the sun rose, Reggie was hundreds of miles away, reunited with Tiana and their teenage children. To them, he spun a story of how Tanisha had grown distant and decided to end their marriage. Tiana, unaware of the monstrous acts Reggie had committed, welcomed him back with open arms. Meanwhile, Tanisha's absence didn't go unnoticed. When she failed to show up for her shift at the sheriff's office, her colleagues grew concerned. Calls to her phone went unanswered, and when officers arrived at her home, they were met with a horrifying scene: the lifeless bodies of Tanisha and her daughters. The brutal murders of Tanisha Carter and her twin daughters sent shockwaves through the community, especially after their bodies were discovered in the basement of their home. Tanisha's lifeless form was found at the foot of the stairs, her face bloodied and bruised, while the twins were tragically located nearby, wrapped in blankets as if Reggie had tried to mask the horror of his actions. The scene was haunting, a heartbreaking testament to the devastation wrought by a man they had trusted and loved. Investigators worked tirelessly to uncover the truth, and it didn't take long for them to zero in on Reggie Lewis as the prime suspect. His sudden disappearance, coupled with the damning evidence left behind, painted a grim picture of his involvement. Neighbors' security cameras captured Reggie leaving the house late at night with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, his face obscured but identifiable. The footage also showed Tanisha arriving home earlier that evening, visibly happy and unsuspecting of the horror that awaited her. Forensic teams combed through the house, uncovering a trove of evidence that sealed Reggie's fate. Fingerprints on the knife matched his, and the wine glass Tanisha drank from tested positive for sedatives. Blood spatter analysis confirmed the sequence of events, illustrating the calculated and cold-blooded nature of the crime. Meanwhile, a nationwide manhunt for Reggie was launched. His mugshot and the details of his horrific crime were broadcast on every major news outlet. Authorities warned the public that he was dangerous and possibly armed, urging anyone with information to come forward. Reggie, however, believed he was untouchable. He settled into life with Tiana and his teenage children as if nothing had happened. Tiana, unaware of the monstrous acts he had committed, welcomed him back, believing his fabricated story that Tanisha had left him. But Reggie's arrogance proved to be his downfall. He underestimated the determination of law enforcement and the power of technology. Investigators tracked his movements using credit card transactions and cell phone records, eventually pinpointing his location at Tiana's home in Houston. In the early hours of the morning, a SWAT team surrounded the house. Through a loudspeaker, they demanded Reggie surrender. Inside, Reggie initially refused, pacing the living room as Tiana and the children cowered in fear. He contemplated making a run for it but quickly realized there was no escape. After a tense standoff lasting nearly 2 hours, Reggie finally emerged, his hands raised in surrender. He was taken into custody without incident, his face betraying no emotion. As he was led away, reporters shouted questions, but he remained silent, his stoic demeanor chilling to all who witnessed it. During his trial, the evidence against Reggie was overwhelming. Prosecutors painted a vivid picture of a man who had manipulated and deceived everyone around him, exploiting Tanisha's love and devotion before betraying her in the most heinous way possible. Witnesses testified to Tanisha's character, describing her as a kind-hearted and dedicated woman who had given everything to a man who didn't deserve her. Reggie's lack of remorse shocked even the most seasoned legal professionals. He sat in the courtroom, emotionless, as gruesome details of the murders were recounted. When given the opportunity to speak, he offered no apology, instead blaming his actions on a moment of weakness. The jury deliberated for only 2 hours before delivering their verdict, guilty on all counts. The judge, visibly disgusted by Reggie's crimes, sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. "You robbed 3 innocent lives of their future," the judge said. "Your actions were cold, calculated, and unforgivable. Justice demands that you never see the outside of a prison cell again." As Reggie was escorted from the courtroom, a crowd gathered outside, holding signs demanding justice for Tanisha and her daughters. The case became a symbol of the dangers of misplaced trust and the devastating consequences of unbridled deceit. Reggie's life of manipulation and lies had come full circle, ending where it had begun, behind bars. But this time, there would be no early release, no second chances. For the lives he destroyed, justice was finally served. The tragic story of Tanisha and Reggie is a chilling reminder of how misplaced trust can lead to unimaginable heartbreak. What began as a hopeful love story quickly unraveled into a nightmare of betrayal, lies, and violence. It forces us to confront the devastating consequences of ignoring red flags in the name of love and redemption. What would you do if the person you trusted most was hiding a life-altering secret? Could you find it in your heart to forgive, or would you demand justice? If this story left you stunned, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Chronicles, where we bring you more gripping tales of betrayal, deception, and the dark corners of human behavior.